My belief as both a sorcerer among many other labels, I don't really care about labels at this point, but I do use many of them interchangeably for myself. One of my beliefs, as someone who is both an occultist and also someone who experiences plurality of consciousness because I am a DID system and have that disability, is that my spirits and my gods are extensions of my brain, my body, my heart. They're extensions of me, but also I'm extensions of them. I believe that it works both ways. I believe that because for me, my DID headmates, who are my multiple consciousnesses, are oftentimes overmeshed or interlaced with my spirits and my spirituality, I agree with the belief that spirit is mind, but I don't think it's exclusively mind or limited to mind. And I definitely don't think that just because you wish super strongly about something, that that's enough to manifest it into reality. I do think that although spirit is mind and mind is spirit, and I am my gods and my spirits, and they are a part of me, but I am a small individuated part of them equally, um, doesn't mean that I think I can just do whatever the hell I want, and just because I see myself as someone who has ascended the left-hand path and merged myself with my god form, and with my gods, does not mean I think that I am like above my humanity, unfortunately, or maybe not so unfortunately, because wizards got to get humbled. But I think that people misunderstand these different things because they have a hard time conceptualizing it, and that's fair. But they forget that spirit comes from the Greek pneumatos or pneumatos, which is like consciousness, and spirit was consciousness. Um, Spirits are also the stars, the planets, the planetary forces of the constellation. If you look at the Goetic sigils, a lot of their sigils are of what they do, but also have like astrological pieces to them. And Belial's sigil, for example, in the Lemegeton and the Lesser Key, his sigil is like a fortress. It's like a sort of castle fortress, which is really fitting for him, and I really like that sigil, and it makes me happy whenever I see that one. Um, but if you look at their different sigils, it kind of says in a way what they're about. In the same way that a castle's walls or a guard tower of a castle is the defense of that castle, is it the defender? Belial is a force that can both destroy and also build up defense. They are something that can break men down and break their defenses down. They're really good, actually, at being ridiculously kind of notorious to ward against, because they're a spirit specifically known to be a master of defense, and that's kind of one of their whole deals. So it's interesting because the way that my brain sort of conceptualized that when I was starting to work with Belial was that he is both a king and also a war general. And the way I would imagine him is he was like a politician, a war general, and like a king, or sort of like I have this drawing that I did of him where he has like these different pins that I put on him, and one of them's like an anarchy symbol, and one of them's a pin that just says "I'm a politician." Because that's the energy that he like kind of gives off to me, is like kind of a war general kind of guy or force, I guess, is sort of how how that's conveyed to my brain. He's also conveyed with animal features to my brain. Like my interpretation of his energy is he sort of looks like, it's not exactly a goat and it's not exactly a bull. It's some other animal that I don't know if it really exists, but the way that like he looks to me is something that's not quite a bull and not quite a goat, but it's something in between a goat and a bull, and that's sort of how he he looks to me. He's a funny guy, but so I see that like my DID headmates are my minds, are my spirits, are me as multiple people. And I think in the same way, we live in a galaxy that has a sun. So we have a sun in our galaxy, but then we have all the planets. And I think that it's actually not so different from how I started as one baby. I would assume at some point I was abused and it forced me to split into, out of raw survival, multiple people in one body as opposed to one person, one body, which is the usual thing. And I think that to me, it's actually the same as how there's the sun, but then there's these planets around the sun. And on the tree of life, there are 10 Sephiroth, and they all came from Keter. And I think the planets come from the stars, and all the Sephiroth, they came from Keter. But then the tree of death, um, which I believe you can get to through the left side of the Sephiroth, the left pillar, but also in the X in the top part, and the part that has like the hidden. Some people call it Da'ath, but or I might be pronouncing these things wrong, so I apologize if I am. Might be Diat. I'm not sure, but what I'm trying to say is that in the same way that I believe I can be multiple minds, one body, and in my case, unfortunately, that was a existence forced upon me from severe repeated childhood abuse. It was my brain's last mode of self-defense was to split off different people so that we live as multiple people every day. And it's not a choice. It is disabling. But I actually think it's comparable to these different pantheons and methods of philosophically and psychologically viewing both humanity and consciousness and psychology and nature, but also the wider planet that we're on, the planets around us, and the stars around us. And in the same way that we are all made of star junk, we know that the atoms come from the stars now. We know that all the building blocks of our universe come from the stars. And if you don't know about that, I recommend looking into that. Um, so the planets come from the stars, and we come from the planets. And then we also come from the animals and our parents as well, and their parents before them, so on and so forth. But my DID headmates come from each other and from the same brain, but are born in the same body. And we split and we haven't stopped actually dividing. We're up to like 30 something at this point, and before it was like 3ish for a very long time, or it seemed like it was, but it really maybe wasn't. And the more we explore our own consciousness, it seems we keep finding new things, and that does cause more dividing. But I also trust my brain to know what it needs to do for my survival, and I trust myself enough to know that what I do have access to is a lot at this point through my deep introspection and work to understand my disabilities. And for me, my sorcery directly is a means of coping with my disabilities, with my plurality of consciousness, with my DID, with my autism, with my PTSD, also with my queer identities. It's also an outlet for that. It is an outlet for me as a transgender person to express myself. It is also an outlet for me as I use the label androsexual person. That's someone who is attracted to masculinity regardless of sex or gender, but they are mostly attracted to masculinity. So I would say, like, one way of putting that is being mostly attracted to men, but not exclusively, in the same way that my gender is that of someone who is mostly a man, but not exclusively. So there is fluidity in there. And so I say androsexual for my sexuality, and I say gender fluid trans man for our system's gender, because it does fluctuate depending on our DID alters and who is there. But I think that the gods are these core concepts, the Jungian archetypes. They are these core sort of characters that humans have made to explain universal concepts that are absolutely necessary to our survival, such as knowledge, love, death, nature. There's a bunch of other things that gods can be of. Those are just the ocean. The ocean, that's an important one. There's a lot of different things that there can be gods of, but I think the gods are what they represent. And I think that actually I am not a separate thing from nature either. I'm just able to express myself in verbal language, which is just more symbols that are conveyed as like different meanings and things. But humans, we all live based in stories because we need stories and able to survive. And theism is viewed the wrong way because people don't understand pantheism, and they don't understand that the ancient cultures of the world, these different indigenous cultures across the world, and these different pantheistic and polytheistic pagan cultures around the world did not view the gods and these different things how modern people do. They understood them as the planets, the stars, nature itself, and parts of us. And it's been forgotten, but that's why pantheism is so important. It's because it's telling you that you aren't a separate thing from your mind. You are your mind and your body. But because we live in a world controlling all of our minds through these addiction boxes, and also through many other ways, controlling the media, controlling what you eat and the things in your food, controlling your autonomy on every single level, your bodily autonomy, telling you what you are and aren't allowed to believe and do and think, and everything else. In the modern world, religion is actually a tool to control everyone's spirits, because spirit is mind and also body and the things around us. But because we see the universe as something separated from ourselves and as something separated from spirit, it's all just divided. But people also don't even realize that psychology, even using psychological terms for these things, half of all psychology at least, and analytical psychology itself, was invented by a Christian man who was an occultist, Carl Jung. And as much as people want to try and separate that from the history shows time and time again that it is occultists, regardless of their religious or spiritual backgrounds. It's occultists who bring up the philosophical ideas that end up defining science going forward. So much of psychology came from an occultist. And you can't deny that if you look at the history. And so it's really interesting because we live in this really rigid world controlling all of us that is trying to make us believe that the gods and everything else is so far high above us and we'll never be able to reach them, when really the gods are you. They're a part of your brain. They're a part of you right now. They don't have to come to you. You don't have to go to them. You just have to find the way that works for you to connect to that which is beyond and yet is within yourself. And it's interesting to me because I was an atheist for a very long time. And I was actually not only an atheist, I was an anti-theist. I was Christian in childhood, deconverted, and then I was an anti-theist until 20. And when I summoned my first Jinn, or excuse me, Jinny, that was when I became more agnostic. And then, because you can practice witchcraft even as an atheist or even as someone who isn't sure. Like when I first started, I didn't really know what I believed, and I was purely kind of approaching it from a psychological standpoint at that point in my life. And then later, I was able to see it in different ways. And the thing that really solidly for me stopped me from being even agnostic was being visited by an angel, and specifically the angel Azrael from Islam. And I am not Islamic, but I have a lot of respect for Sufis, Islamic sorcery, and I think that they're actually probably hundreds of years ahead of Western sorcery, but unfortunately, all that stuff is in a language that I can't read. But the minimal, tiny surface level I've been able to grasp, it seems like they're way, way beyond what we're doing over here in the West. Anyways, but yeah, so I just wanted to make this video, and I'm gonna watch this back, and I hope that this is what I was intending for it to be.